Hey guys, welcome back. It's Adam, Science Tutor, and today we're going to be covering the extensor muscles of the forearms. So previously we talked about the flexor muscles of the forearms, but now we're going to talk about the extensors. I think the extensors are, I don't know, I think they're much harder to learn. There's less muscles, but they don't have as many patterns, and I think their naming is a little off unless you get down to the gritty points of what the names mean. But we'll get started off here. Brachial Radialis. So it's going to be, you have to position yourself. So this is your radius side. This is your radius bone. So this is actually going to be like the divide between flexor muscles and your extensor muscles. So it's going to be their first muscle you see, and that's kind of starts off. So the brachial radialis muscle, it's going to be this one here in green. And it's going to be one of the exceptions. So it is originates from the lateral supracondylar ridge of the humerus, which would be like right up in here. So that's the lateral supracondylar ridge, a little bit further up than the epicondyle, but supracondylar ridge up here. So that's the lateral supracondylar ridge of the humerus. And then it's going to come down, it's going to insert in the styloid process at the radius. So that's the styloid process, which limits our ability to abduct our hand because there's a bone sticking out. That's where the brachial radialis inserts into. It's going to have the radial nerve. This is another exception. Radial recurrent artery, you'll see that in the first three muscles I'm going to talk about. But radial nerve is an exception, and its primary action is going to be to flex our forearm. So it's a flexor, which is odd because it's in the extensor side, but it's only really in the extensor side because of where it originates from, and that's in where it inserts. Then we're going to go to extensor carpi radialis longus. So you had your brachial radialis right here, and then right next to it, you're going to have your extensor carpi radialis longus. And if you remember from previously, longus means it's a long tendon. So on a cadaver, you'd see a long tendon, a stretch of a tendon, and that'd be our extensor carpi radialis longus. If we break down our name, it's an extensor muscle. So we know it's on this side of the forearm. Carpi, it's going to attach to a bone. Radialis, so it's on our radius side, not our ulnar side. And longus, it has a long tendon. This is also going to attach at the lateral supracondylar ridge of the humerus. This is an exception. These two are the only ones that are going to be that way, or originate from that. This is going to go all the way up to the base of our second metacarpal, so right in here. It's a radial recurrent artery. You're going to see that all day. Radial recurrent artery, radial nerve. It's another exception to the majority of the muscles we're going to talk about today, and it abducts the hand. So you have your muscle in here. It's pulling. It's abducting the hand. This does not extend, does not mess with our second, our metacarpal too much. It pulls there, and even abducts the second metacarpal. Okay, and then now we're going to talk about the extensor radialis brevis. It's right next to the extensor carpi radialis. This is supposed to be extensor carpi radialis brevis. My apologies. I'm going to make a correction on that. Extensor carpi radialis brevis, because it doesn't connect to the bone. It's an extensor muscle. It's on the radialis side. Brevis, broken down, brevis means it's a short tendon. So you'll see the extensor carpi radialis longus, the long tendon, and then right next to it, more medial, you'll see the brevis, the shorter tendon. This is going to be our origin point for most of these muscles, and it's the common extensor tendon of the lateral epicondyle. So let me grab it. So this is supposed to be lateral epicondyle. And then this needs a carpi. Okay, good. Okay, so, and it's going to insert, so this is the easier portion, I guess, of what it is. So the extensor carpi radialis longus inserts at the second metacarpal. The extensor carpi radialis brevis is going to insert at the third metacarpal. So it's 1, 2, which makes it kind of cool. So base of the third metacarpal, its artery, once again, is the radial recurrent artery. The nerve, you're going to see this nerve throughout the rest of these muscles. It's the deep branch of the radial nerve. That's going to be, you're going to see that from most of these nerves. So remember your exceptions, and these are your common ones, your common that relate to the other ones. And this is going to help abduct the hand as well. So then we're going to get to the extensor digitorum muscle. So if you remember on the flexor side, we had the extensor digitorum, or no, the flexor digitorum superficialis. On this side, we're going to have the extensor digitorum. Similarly, it's going to be on the extensor portion of digits 2 through 5. Extensor expansion of digits 2 through 5. Its artery is going to be the posterior interosseous artery. We're going to see that throughout the rest of the muscles that we're going to talk about. So posterior interosseous artery. So the first three had radial recurrent artery. First two had radial nerve. We're going to see deep branch of radial nerve for the rest of the muscles. And we're going to see now posterior interosseous artery and deep branch of radial nerve for the rest of these as well. So its action extends digits 2 through 5. So pretty easy. Extensor digiti minimi. It's a fun little one to say, but that's going to attach at the fifth metacarpal, the base of the fifth metacarpal. Extensor digiti minimi. So we have our extensor digitorum, and then you have the extensor digiti minimi. It's going to be a very small muscle, and it attaches up or inserts up at the pinky. And remember, we have the same origin. It's a common extensor tendon of the lateral epicondyle. So that's going to be our common origin for all these. And the extensor digiti minimi is going to be the extensor for our pinky. So it's kind of cool. Digiti minimi just means the small digit, the small phalange. So, and it's an extensor. Extensor carpi ulnaris. So we had our extensor carpi radialis longus, radialis brevis. Now we have our extensor carpi ulnaris. So that's on the ulnar side. It's going to have the same origins, common extensor tendon of the medial epicondyle, of the lateral epicondyle. And its primary action is going to be to adduct the hand. Adduct the hand, my bad. So abduct, adduct. So abduct, adduct. So it's going to adduct the hand. It's on the carpi side, or on the ulnar side. And once again, to break down the name, extensor, it's an extensor muscle. Therefore, it's on this side of the arm. Carpi, it attaches at a bone, base of fifth metacarpal bone. And then ulnaris, it's on the ulnaris side, not on the radius side. Very cool. Okay, so we went through the superficial muscles pretty quick. You can see here where each of them kind of lay. The brachial radialis won't go further than the styloid process of the radius. The extensor carpi radialis longus will come up a little bit more, and it's going to wrap up and around the brevis and go to the second metacarpal. The third, or the extensor carpi radialis brevis, has a shorter tendon, and it's going to go to the third metacarpal. So very cool. So that's with the superficial muscles of the extensor forearm. Now for the deep muscles. So the deep muscles, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a memorization thing, but a neat little trick. They say it's a brevis sandwich. So what they mean by that is you're going to have two longus muscles, pulsus longus muscles, and then you're going to have a brevis in the middle. So therefore a brevis sandwich, or maybe like a brevis sandwich. Yeah. So that's the way you could memorize it. I just tried memorizing it, and I just said it to myself enough times where I memorized these. But it is a brevis sandwich. So this is your brevis muscle, and these are going to be your pulsus longuses. But let me get through. So first, I start off with the abductor pulsus longus. So, and these are all going to have different origins too. So than what the superficial muscles will have. So, and of course that works with most muscles, but they all share a commonality of the interosseous membrane. This is in the deep layer. So they all originate from the interosseous membrane, with the exception of the supinator, which we'll get to in a bit. They also share their arteries and nerves is posterior interosseous artery and nerve. The actions will be different, their insertions will be a little different, but their origin is the posterior interosseous membrane. There is posterior because anatomically this is anterior, posterior interosseous membrane, posterior interosseous nerve and artery. So abductor pollicis longus. So abductor, so it's going to abduct the thumb. So abducting the hand, abducting the thumb, like that. So it goes away from the other digits. Its insertion is at the base of the first metacarpal. So as you see here, we're just at the base of the first metacarpal. And then beyond that, we're going to have the extensor pollicis brevis. This is the middle of our sandwich. And this inserts up at the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb. And so it's going to go up a little bit further. So it's at the phalanx, so the proximal phalanx of the thumb. So it's going to be right around here, right around where the metacarpal metaphalangeal joint is. And it extends the proximal phalanx of the thumb. So this is the brevis of our sandwich, so we know we're going to have another longus muscle. So, and then once again, the origin is interosseous membrane. It's artery and nerve. You already know it. Posterior interosseous arteries and posterior interosseous nerves. Now, to complete our sandwich, we have extensor pollicis longus. So it inserts at the distal phalanx of the thumb, so at the very tip. So these are distal phalangeal joint, so a distal phalanx of the thumb, and its action is to extend the distal phalanx of the thumb. So the action and insertion, once you get those down, is really easy. We have one more muscle, or two more muscles, but one more muscle in the proximity, and it's called the extensor indicis muscle. This is probably my favorite on the extensor side. So the extensor indicis muscle, it sounds like index finger, and that's because it is. So it inserts at the second metacarpal. So it inserts at your index finger, and its job is to extend your index finger. So it's pretty easy. Once again, we have the same origin, and we have the same artery and nerve. So, and that's the interosseous, posterior interosseous artery, nerve, and interosseous membrane. Supinator is a little different. So supinators, it comes here and it comes across. Let's see, to the radius. No, it comes here and it comes across this way. So it's going to wrap from your lateral side to your lateral to medial side. Its origin is like the superficial muscle, so its origin is the common extensor tendon of the lateral epicondyle. So that's what the origin is. However, it is a deep muscle, so keep that in mind. Its insertion is the lateral, posterior, and anterior surface of the radius. So it comes across here and it attaches here and a part of the posterior and anterior surface of the radius. So it's kind of interesting. Its artery is the posterior interosseous artery, so that's what it shares with the deep muscles. Its nerve, going back to what the nerves were in here, a deep branch of radial nerve, and its action is to supinate its forearms. It's in the name supinator. So supinator, and I'm gonna talk about this in an upcoming video about biceps brachii, but supinates, it's like you're serving soup, supinates, and then pronates is the opposite. Pronators, you'll see that in the flexor side of the arms. Pronate, supinates, so supinator, supinates. So yeah, very cool, very good. These are both superficial and the deep muscles. We can only see the deep muscles if we refract back the superficial ones. There's a little gap in here where you can see the extensor pollicis brevis and the abductor pollicis longus, but for the most part you gotta reflect these black to see any of the deep muscles. But thank you guys very much for watching. I'm gonna put a Word document in the bottom, and you guys are more than welcome to use it, look at it, study it, but it'll just have some extra tips and whatnot. So thank you guys very much. Tune in next time.